What's up guys, it's Alexa, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make a Discord bot that you can play tic-tac-toe with in your server. So basically this bot is going to allow you to play tic-tac-toe against a person. It's going to manage updating the board, taking turns, and it's also going to determine the winner as well as determine a tie if that is the game output. We're gonna get started right away, so let's hop into PyCharm. Right here I have my basic template set up. If this looks unfamiliar to you, then I highly suggest you check out my other Discord bot tutorials where I show you how to configure and set up all the beginner steps for projects like these. So that playlist will be linked in the description. The first thing we are going to do in this code is import a library called random, and we're going to need this for a small feature, but it's going to be used later on when we want to decide who's going first for our tic-tac-toe game. So I have my command prefix and this winning conditions variable I've created, and basically what this stores, it's a 2D array, it's what it's called, and a 2D array is basically an array in an array. So you can see that I have these arrays here. They're made up of 3 numbers and they're all stored in this one big array, and they basically specify the winning conditions for tic-tac-toe. So 0, 1, 2 would mean you have all of your marks straight across the first line, and then 3, 4, 5 would mean you won by getting 3 across the middle line. And these all account for diagonals and vertical wins, so I advise you to just copy and paste this. So the first command we're going to create for this tic-tac-toe bot is sort of an initialize command, and this is going to create a new tic-tac-toe game for us. So I'm going to create that command by saying client.command, and I'm going to create an asynchronous function, and I'm going to call this command tic-tac-toe. And I'm going to pass in ctx, and I'm going to pass in 2 other arguments, one for the first player and the next for the second player. So I'm going to create an argument called p1, and I'm going to make sure that this is a discord.member class. And basically what that means, it takes in a mention or a ping. So when you ping someone or mention someone in Discord, you usually at and then say their name. But the good thing about these is that we can actually use them in our code to get a lot of information that a normal string wouldn't be able to give us. And it makes it easier to differentiate between people because mentions are unique, but strings, or let's say if I put a player name in there instead, there could be people in the server with the same name or something like that. So that's why it's important to specify that this is a discord.member class. And then we're going to create another argument called p2 to represent player 2, and we're also going to make sure that this is a discord.member. Oops, I almost forgot. Actually, we need some more variables before this command. So these are just going to be game state variables that are used. I'm going to create a variable called player1 and set it equal to an empty string. I'm going to create another one for player 2. And I'm going to create a variable called turn, which is actually going to store the player whose turn it is. And then I'm going to create a variable called game over, and I'm going to set that to true for now. So the reason I'm creating all of these variables outside of here is to just make sure that they're declared on a global level so we can access them later in our different functions and commands. Also, one more variable we need to create is the board variable. And this is going to be a list or array, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to represent the board, the tic-tac-toe board. So back in my tic-tac-toe command, I'm going to declare a couple of variables to be global. And this is kind of just how Python works. A lot of other languages you don't have to do this, but for Python you do. So I'm going to create a variable or a global variable for player 1, another global for player 2, a global for turn, and also a global for game over. And one more, we need a global for count, and count is just going to help us determine if the game ends in a tie. So we'll get to these later on. The first thing we want to check here is if the game is over. So basically what that means in my code is I initially set the game over to true. And the game is over because a new game or another game hasn't been started. So that's why that variable is true. So basically what this if statement is saying is if a game is not started, so if a game is over, then we're going to allow you to use this command and initialize a new game. Because you don't want to be using this command in the middle of a game and then it's just going to mess everything up. So that's why we have this if statement here. Inside of here, we're going to create another global called board, and this is going to allow us to make global changes to the board variable. And then we'll create the board variable, and we're going to set that equal to a list, and inside of this list, we need a couple of things. So basically, the way we're going to create the board is with emojis. And the emoji I'm going to use for the tiles or the squares in a tic-tac-toe board is the white _large_square emoji. So that is how you can get that emoji. And basically what we're going to do is just copy this and make our 3x3 board. So we're going to have 3 along the top, and then I'm just going to indent for visual purposes. So this sort of makes a tic-tac-toe board, and then 3 across the middle, and then we need 3 across the bottom. So now we have this array that represents our tic-tac-toe board, and we can change this when we want to place down a mark or when another player wants to place down a mark. We also want to initialize a turn variable, so we can just set it to an empty string. And now we're going to set game over equal to false, because now that we've done this, a game has actually been started, so we can put game over equals false. And then we're also going to set count equal to 0. So count is a variable that represents the number of turns that have been taken. And as I said before, that's going to help us determine if the game is a tie or not. Now I'm going to use these player variables and these arguments I defined to update the player variables. So I'm going to say player 1 equals P1, and then player 2 equals P2. Now we are going to create the code that is going to print the board. So when we run this command initially, we're basically specifying who we're playing against, and we're going to print the blank board. So all we have to say here is line equals an empty string, and then we're going to create a for loop. We're going to say for x in range len and then board. So what this is saying is we're going to cycle through the board array that we just created up here, and for every tile in the board, we're going to check if that is the end of a line. So really what I have here is just for formatting purposes. I wanted to send 3 messages with the 3 lines of tiles instead of just one message with all of the tiles, because I thought the format looked better, like the spacing. So this is why I have that. But if you want to send all of them at once, all you have to kind of do is print this array. But the way I'm doing it is so that the format looks a little nicer. So I'm going to say if x equals 2, or x is equal to 5, or x is equal to 8. So basically, if we're at the end of a line, then we're going to say line plus equals, and then a space for formatting, and then board x. And then we're going to await ctx.send the line. And then we're going to set line back to the empty string, because we're going to be starting a new line. For the else, we're going to say line plus equals the space, and then we're going to say board x. So that is going to print our board nicely formatted in the shape of a tic-tac-toe board. Now we have to determine who is going to go first. So there's multiple ways you can do this, but I just thought, let's just randomly choose between the 2 players who goes first. And that is where we're going to use the random library that we imported. So we can say num equals random.randint, and then we're going to put in 1, 2. So it's going to pick a random integer between 1 and 2, inclusive. So 1 is going to represent player 1 going first, and 2 will represent player 2 going first. And then we're just going to say if number equals 1, then the turn is equal to player 1. And then elif num equals 2, the turn is equal to player 2. Also, we just want to send whose turn it is to the user so they know. So we'll say await ctx.send, and then we can say it is, and then we'll ping or mention the player. We can do that by saying the greater than less than sign, whatever it is, plus string, and then player 1.id, plus, and then the greater than less than sign, and then we'll say turn. So that's going to tell us which player's turn it is. Same line for player 2, but change this to player2.id. Also, one thing we have to add for this function, or this command, is for this if statement here, if game over, we're going to do all this. But if the game is not over, we want to tell the user that they have to wait for the game to be over, or they have to finish the other game. So we'll say ctx.send, a game is already in progress, finish it before starting a new one. Something along those lines. So now we have our initialize command all done. We've created a new game. Now we need a way to actually play the game. So I'm going to create a command called place, and that's going to allow each player to put down marks on the board. So let's create another command by saying @client.command, an asynchronous function. We're going to call that place. We're going to pass in ctx, and we're also going to pass in position. And we want to make sure this position is an integer. So we're going to say :integer. So the position argument is going to represent where they want to place the mark on the board. So the top left of the board would represent position 1, and then the bottom right of the board would represent position 9. And it just goes in that order. We're also going to have to set a couple of global variables in here. So we'll say global turn, global player 1, global player 2, global board, and global count. Now, similar to this if statement we have up here, to check that a game is not currently going on, we need to check if a game is going on. And if a game is going on, then we're going to allow this user to use the command. So we'll say if not game over, we're going to set a variable mark equal to an empty string just to initialize it. And the mark is going to change based on the player that's turn it is. And first we want to make sure that the person using this command is first in the game and also that it's their turn. We don't want people going more than once or overriding someone's turn. So what we have to say is if turn equals ctx.author, and our turn variable we're getting from up here where we say turn equals player 1 or turn equals player 2. So if the turn is equal to ctx.author, then we're just going to put some code in here that will allow us to place. But if it's not, then we want to say await ctx.send it is not your turn. Also, I just want to add an else statement for this game over, so we can do that here and say else. So if a game is not going on, we're just going to send something to the server that says, please start a new game using the Tic Tac Toe command. Alright, so where were we? In this if statement, turn equals ctx.author. We also want to check whose turn it is. So we'll say if turn equals player 1, and this is going to determine which mark we use. So if the turn is equal to player 1, we're going to set the mark equal to this emoji called regional underscore indicator underscore X. So that's going to represent an X or a cross, whatever you call it. And then in the elif, we're going to say turn equals player 2. Then we want to change our mark to an O, which is, I'm going to be using the O2 emoji. So once we figure out our mark, we also have to figure out if the person that used this command put in the right position or a valid position. So a valid position is going to be a number that's greater than 0 and less than 10, and it should be an integer. So we'll say if 0, this is also a way to write that. You can say if the position is greater than 0 and less than 10, you can write it like that, or you can say and, whichever way. PyCharm yelled at me and said you should use it this way, so I decided to keep it like that, but use whichever way you want. So if our position is valid, then we're going to write some code in here. But one other condition we want to include in this is we want to check if this space that we want to, or this position that we want to put our mark on is blank. Because if it's not blank, we're not allowed to mark it. If it's already been marked by a player, you can't put your mark on it. That's just a rule of tic-tac-toe. So we can say and board. And remember, board is a list and lists start at index 0. So we have to do pos -1 because our position starts at 1. So if pos -1 is equal to white underscore large underscore square, so if it's blank, then we are going to continue. However, if it's not blank, we're going to create an else statement and say await ctx.send, and we're going to say be sure to choose an integer between 1 and 9 inclusive, and an unmarked tile. So we just want to let the user know that. Now, inside of this if statement, we want to mark the board with our position that we specified. So we'll say board pos -1. We're going to set that equal to our mark. And we're also going to increase the count by 1. And that just means that a turn has been taken. Next, we're going to have our code that prints the board again. Now, you may be wondering why I didn't put the print board code in a specific function so that we can use it in multiple areas of our program. Well, I tried to do that, but apparently you can't use the ctx argument from a function that's not an asynchronous one or part of the Discord library. So that was a little difficult. If you guys know how to do that, let me know, of course. But this is just what I came up with. So we're actually just going to use the same code from up here, and we can just copy it. I know someone's going to be like, this is horrible programming practice. I'm sorry. I don't know how to do it. So I'm trying my best here. We'll say print board. We're going to have our print board function, and that's going to update with our new mark that we put over here. The next thing we want to do is after every turn, we want to check if there's a winner. So we're actually going to create a function for that, and we can create a regular function. We're going to create one down here, so make sure you're outside of this client.command, and we're going to create a Python function. We'll say def check winner is what we'll call it. We're going to pass in the winning conditions, which was the 2D array from right up here. And we're also going to pass in the mark. We're going to make sure we set game over as global so we're able to edit it in this function. And then we're going to create a for loop. So we're going to say for condition in winning conditions. So for every condition in this array, we want to check if the board, and then we'll say condition 0, so that's going to get the proper winning index, and we'll say if that's equal to our mark, and we want to check if the other ones are also equal, so condition 1 and board condition 2. Oops, I have to actually say that these are equal to mark. I think I messed up a bracket. Yes. Alright, hopefully I didn't mess up any of these brackets, but if our winning conditions are met, Then we're going to say game over equals true. And that is going to update. So going back to our place command, and right after the print board, we're going to call that function. So we'll say check winner, we'll pass in winning conditions, and we'll pass in mark. Now we want to check if the game is over. So if someone won, we'll say if game over. Then we want to await ctx.send mark plus wins. So this is going to say something like X wins or O wins. And then we're going to create an elif, and this elif is going to account for if it ends in a tie, which is actually very common in tic-tac-toe because it's such a basic game that a lot of people learn how to not lose pretty quickly. So we'll say elif turn equals, we'll say elif count is greater than or equal to 9. So basically what we're saying is if we filled up the board, or if we taken the total amount of turns that it's possible to take, then we're going to send something to the server saying it's a tie. Alright, looks good. So remember, this is only going to be called if there is a winning condition, but once you begin the game and go through the first 2 or 3 turns, this is not going to affect your code really. So next we want to write some code that will allow us to switch turns. And this is actually pretty simple. We say if turn equals player 1, then we're going to set turn to player 2, and then we'll have an elif saying if the turn is equal to player 2, we're going to set turn equal to player 1. So that's pretty simple. Let's just clean this up a little bit. Alright, so our code is almost done. There is one thing that I added here. So below this function, or at the end of our code, I'm going to create what's called an error handler. Sometimes errors can be thrown inside of our commands, or when we input stuff into our commands, and we want a way to account for this and let the user know what's going on, why the command isn't working. So a common error that might occur with this tic-tac-toe command is the user might accidentally not enter a mention as a person. They might just enter their name, and that's not going to work because our code wants a Discord.member class. So we're going to create an error handler that will tell the user if they make this mistake what to do. And also in that handler we're going to make sure that just in case a player misses an argument or forgets to put one, that they're notified as well. So to create an error handler, all we have to say is at tic-tac-toe, so that's the command we want to create the error handler for, and then say .error, and then we can create an asynchronous function, and you can call it really whatever you want, but I'm just going to call it tic-tac-toe underscore error, and inside of this function we're going to pass in ctx and error. And what we want to do inside of here is check if our error is a certain error that comes with the Discord library. So we'll say if, and then we can use the isInstance method, and this isInstance method is basically going to check if our error is of a certain type. So we'll say error, and then we're going to check if our error is a commands.method missing required argument error. And the missing required argument error is going to be thrown when the user forgets to put in an argument or something. So what we can say is await ctx.send. Please mention 2 players for this command. Now we're going to create another elif and say is instance, and this time we're going to check if our error is a commands.bad argument error. And a bad argument error is going to be called when the argument doesn't fit the type we specified for it. So this is going to be called when that happens, and we'll say await ctx.send, and we'll say please make sure to mention /ping players, and then we'll give an example if they don't know what that is. If you don't know what mentioning and pinging are, you must be new to Discord. And then we're just going to get the bot's ID to show them what a ping looks like. So I'm just going to grab this ID, copy the ID, paste it in here, and this is going to display as a ping. The tic-tac-toe command has an error handler, so we should probably create one for the place command too, just in case someone forgets to put in an argument. So for the @place command, we'll create an error handler, and we're going to create our asynchronous function called place_error, pass in ctx and error. And with this command, we're actually going to use the same if statements here. We can just change the text inside. So if we're missing an argument, we're just going to say please enter a position you would like to mark. And then if it's a bad argument, we're going to say please make sure an integer. Alright, so I added some people to my server and we're gonna play some tic-tac-toe. So I'm just going to run this code. We're first going to use our initialize command called tic-tac-toe to create a new game, and then we're going to mention the people we want to play with. So I'm going to do that, and then let's run this command. And it's saying it's my turn, so I won the random turn picker. So I'm gonna say place, and then let's go in the middle. And then the other player is gonna go. Alright, so it's my turn. You can see that my friend reacted and then removed her reaction because, I don't know, she wanted to be in the video or something. So I'm going to try to place this on a tile that's already been taken. So I'm going to say place 1, and then it's going to tell me that I have to make sure it's on an unmarked tile. So I'm going to say place 3, and then it's going to allow me to place it. Alright, so then I am going to place 4. He is going to go there, so let's see. I think this game's gonna end in a tie, but I guess I'll go 9. Unless I find a way to mess this up somehow. Alright, so it looks like this is going to end in a tie, and once we do that, it says tie. We say thanks for playing. Appropriate nickname, that's very comical. I told them to make sure their names were appropriate for this video. So that's essentially how you create this bot. I'm going to upload all this code to GitHub so you can copy that code if you wish, or following along with the tutorial is also great. So thank you for watching and stay tuned for more videos.